The Human Cycle by Sri Aurobindo. Chapter 5. True and False Subjectivism. To fulfill, then, the collective German ego and secure its growth and domination was at once the right law of reason, the supreme good of humanity, and the mission of the great and supreme Teutonic race. There is a footnote. The emphasis has somewhat shifted now and taken its stand more upon the crude, vitalistic notions of blood, race, life-room. But the old idea is there, giving more force to the later formulations. From this egoistic self-vision flowed a number of logical consequences, each in itself a separate, subjective error. First, since the individual is only a cell of the collectivity, his life must be entirely subservient to the efficient life of the nation. He must be made efficient indeed. The nation should see to his education, proper living, disciplined life, carefully trained and subordinated activity, but as a part of the machine or a disciplined instrument of the national life. Initiative must be this collectivity's execution, the individual's. But where was that vague thing, the collectivity? And how could it express itself, not only as a self-conscious, but an organized and efficient collective will and self-directing energy? The state. There was the secret. Let the state be perfect, dominant, all-pervading, all-seeing, all-effecting. So only could the collective ego be concentrated, find itself, and its life be brought to the highest pitch of strength, organization, and efficiency. Thus Germany founded and established the growing modern era of the cult of the state, and the growing subordination driving in the end towards the effacement of the individual. We can see what it gained: an immense collective power, and a certain kind of perfection and scientific adjustment of means to end, and a high general level of economic, intellectual, and social efficiency, apart from the tremendous momentary force which the luminous fulfillment of a great idea gives to man or nation. What it had begun to lose is as yet only slightly apparent. All that deeper life, vision, intuitive power, force of personality, psychical sweetness, and largeness, which the free individual brings as his gift to the race. Secondly, since the state is supreme, the representative of the divine, or the highest realized functioning of human existence, and has a divine right to the obedience, the unquestioning service, and the whole activity of the individual, the service of state and community is the only absolute rule of morality. Within the state, this may include and sanction all other moral rules, because there no rebel egoism can be allowed, for the individual ego must be lost in that of the state, or become part of it, and all condition of covert or overt war must be abrogated in obedience to the collective good, as determined by the collective will. But in relation to other states, to other collective egos, the general condition, the effective law, is still that of war, of strife between sharply divided egoisms, each seeking to fulfill itself, each hampered and restricted in its field by the others. War, then, is the whole business of the state in its relation to other states. A war of arms, a war of commerce, a war of ideas and cultures, a war of collective personalities, each seeking to possess the world, or at least to dominate and be first in the world. Here there can enter no morality except that of success, though the presence of morality may be a useful stratagem of war. To serve the state, the German collectivity, which is his greater and real self, is the business of the German individual, whether at home or abroad. And to that end, everything which succeeds is justifiable. Inefficiency, incompetence, failure are the only immorality. In war, every method is justified which leads to the military success of the state. In peace, every method which prepares it. For peace between nations is only a covert state of war, and as war is the means of physical survival and domination, so commerce is the means of economic survival and domination. It is, in fact, only another kind of war, another department of the struggle to live, one physical, the other vital. And the life of the body are, so science has assured us, the whole of existence. Thirdly, since the survival of the best is the highest good of mankind, and the survival of the best is secured by the elimination of the unfit and the assimilation of the less fit, the conquest of the world by German culture is the straight path of human progress. But culture is not, in this view, merely a state of knowledge, or a system, or cast of ideas, and moral and aesthetic tendencies. Culture is life, governed by ideas, but by ideas based on the truth of life, and so organized as to bring it to its highest efficiency. Therefore, all life not capable of this culture and this efficiency must be eliminated or trodden down. All life capable of it, but not actually reaching to it, must be taken up and assimilated. But capacity is always a matter of genus and species, and in humanity a matter of race. Logically, then, the Teutonic, we have a footnote, Nordic is now the established term. Logically, then, the Teutonic race is alone entirely capable, and therefore all Teutonic races must be taken into Germany and become part of the German collectivity. Races less capable, but not wholly unfit, must be Germanized. Others, hopelessly decadent like the Latins of Europe and America, or naturally inferior like the vast majority of the Africans and Asiatics, must be replaced where possible. Like the Herreros, or where not possible, dominated, exploited, and treated according to their inferiority. So evolution would advance. So the human race grow towards its perfection. And we have another footnote. This was written more than 30 years ago, but later developments have emphasized and brought out the truth of the description, which was indeed much less apparent then. We need not suppose that all Germany thought in this strenuous fashion, as it was too long represented, or that the majority thought thus consciously. But it is sufficient that an energetic minority of thinkers and strong personalities should seize upon the national life and impress certain tendencies upon it, for these to prevail practically, or at the least to give a general trend subconsciously, even where the thought itself is not actually proposed in the conscious mind. And the actual events of the present hour seem to show that it was this gospel that partly consciously, partly subconsciously, or half articulately, had taken possession of the collective German mind. It is easy to deride the rigidity of this terrible logic, or riddle it with the ideas and truths it has ignored. And it is still easier to abhor, fear, hate, and spew at it, while practically following its principles in our own action with less openness, thoroughness, and courage. But it is more profitable to begin by seeing that behind it there was and is a tremendous sincerity, which is the secret of its force, and a sort of perverse honesty in its errors, the sincerity which tries to look straight at one's own conduct and the facts of life, and the honesty to proclaim the real principles of that conduct, and not, except as an occasional diplomacy, profess others with the lips while disregarding them in the practice. And if this ideal is to be defeated, not merely for a time in the battlefield and in the collective person of the nation, or nations professing it, as happened abortively in the war, but in the mind of man, and in the life of the human race, an equal sincerity and a less perverse honesty has to be practiced by those who have arrived at a better law. The German gospel has evidently two sides, the internal and the external, the cult of the state, nation, or community, and the cult of international egoism. In the first, Germany, even if for a time entirely crushed in the battlefield, seems to have already secured the victory in the moral sense of the human race. The unsparing compulsion as against the assistance of the individual by the state, and we have again footnote, not always in the form of socialism, Bolshevik communism, or fascism. Other forms of government that are nominally based on the principles of individualistic democracy and freedom have begun to follow the same trend under the disguise or the mere profession of its opposite. The unsparing compulsion as against the assistance of the individual by the state, for his and the common good, of course. But who professes to compel for harm? It is almost everywhere either dominant or else growing into a strong and prevailing current of opinion. The champions of individual freedom are now a morally defeated and dwindling army who can only fight on in the hope of a future reaction or of saving something of their principle from the wreck. On the external side, the international, the battle of ideas still goes on. But there were from the beginning ominous signs, and we have a footnote 8 here. The League of Nations was at no time a contrary sign. Whatever incidental or temporary good it might achieve, it could only be an instrument for the domination of the rest of the earth by Europe, and of all by 2 or 3 major nations. And now, after the physical war with its first psychological results is well over, we are already able to see in which direction the tide is likely to flow. War is a dangerous teacher, and physical victory leads often to a moral defeat. Germany, defeated in the war, has won in the afterwar. The German gospel, rearisen in a sterner and fiercer avatar, threatens to sweep all over Europe. It is necessary, if we are not to deceive ourselves, to note that even in this field, what Germany has done is to systematize certain strong actual tendencies and principles of international action, to the exclusion of all that either professed to resist or did actually modify them. If a sacred egoism, and the expression did not come from Teutonic lips, is to govern international relations, then it is difficult to deny the force of the German position. The theory of inferior and decadent races was loudly proclaimed by other than German thinkers, and has governed, with whatever assuaging scruples, the general practice of military domination and commercial exploitation of the weak by the strong. All that Germany has done is to attempt to give it a wider extension and more rigorous execution, and apply it to European as well as to Asiatic and African peoples. Even the severity or brutality of her military methods, or of her ways of colonial or internal political repression, taken at their worst, for much once stated against her has been proved and admitted to be deliberate lies manufactured by her enemies, was only a crystallizing of certain recent tendencies towards the revival of ancient and medieval hard-heartedness in the race. The use and even the justification of massacre and atrocious cruelty in war, on the ground of military exigency and in the course of commercial exploitation, or in the repression of revolt and disorder, has been quite recently witnessed in the other continents, to say nothing of certain outskirts of Europe. And there's a footnote. Witness Egypt, Ireland, India, and afterwards Abyssinia, Spain, China, wherever still man tries to dominate by force over man, or nation over nation. From one point of view, it is well that terrible examples of the utmost logic of these things should be prominently forced on the attention of mankind. For by showing the evil stripped of all veils, the choice between good and evil, instead of a halting between the two, will be forced on the human conscience. Woe to the race if it blinds its conscience and buttresses up its animal egoism with the old justifications. For the gods have shown that karma is not a jest. But the whole root of the German error lies in its mistaking life and the body for the self. It has been said that this gospel is simply a reversion to the ancient barbarism of the religion of Odin. But this is not the truth. It is a new and a modern gospel, born of the application of a metaphysical logic to the conclusions of materialistic science, of a philosophic subjectivism to the objective pragmatic positivism of recent thought. Just as Germany applied the individualistic position to the realization of her communal, subjective existence, so she applied the materialistic and vitalistic thought of recent times, and equipped it with a subjective philosophy. Thus she arrived at a bastard creed, an objective subjectivism, which is miles apart from the true goal of a subjective age. To show the error, it is necessary to see wherein lies the true individuality of man and of the nation. It lies not in its physical, economic, even its cultural life, which are only means and adjuncts, but in something deeper, whose roots are not in the ego, but in a self, one indifference, which relates the good of each, on a footing of equality, and not of strife and domination, to the good of the rest of the world.